And you need, first of all, to allow countries to leave the euro. So what happened was this. When countries joined the euro, the door was locked behind them and the key was thrown away. You join forever. You may not leave. There is no mechanism for leaving. There's no mechanism for leaving. The only way now to get a country like Greece who wants to leave, the only way to permit them to leave is for the existing countries in the euro to come together and agree, all right, if countries wish to leave, they may leave. Then it takes about a year of setting up the new IT systems to enable them with the new currency, the drachma would come back, to enable them to be able to leave the euro. Now, what I'm suggesting is that some Christians need to put pressure on the government to say we must allow Greece to leave if it wants to leave. We must stop forcing them to stay in the euro if they don't want to be in. But really it needs to be addressed fast. Time is running out, in my view. And unless action is taken soon, we are going to end in a train smash. Because the only way to sustain the system is to build up the debt to Southern Europe. Italy now has over $300 billion of debt, euros of debt. So does Greece has some enormous figure, as you know. But these economies are increasingly unsustainable. They're losing their exports, losing their industries, losing their employment. It's a disaster zone in Southern Europe. You need to go and talk to the people. I go down there from time to time. It's terrible.
Thanks, Michael. We have further questions.
My question was very similar. It was to have some clarification.
Yeah.
What was said this morning. Because if I look on the political front, the parties that suggest that we should get out of euro, I would say are dangerous. So in my case, I come from France, if my accent didn't tell you already. And if I wanted to stop euro, I would put a Marine Le Pen voting ballot in April. And I am not sure that this would improve relationships. And I would rather be in the European bus towards the cliff.
Yes, looking at it from France's point of view, for a moment. You will remember when France entered the euro, a number of votes in favor was only 100,000 more in favor than against. It was by such a tiny margin that France came into the euro. Now, the difficulty is how do you, if you want to get rid of the euro, which is what I really believe is necessary, if you want to get rid of it, how would you do it? How would you do it? There is a book recently published by Cambridge University Press, and I'm from Cambridge myself, so I know about this, where the former Deputy Prime Minister of Denmark has suggested how you do it. And the way you do it is like letting down a balloon. So that the strongest currency must come out first. So Germany would come out first, and then gradually the euro value would decline and decline and decline and decline, just slowly as countries left, and it would come to a place where it was the true value of the remaining currencies. Now, France is in a very difficult position because its banks have lent so much in Southern Europe. So any leaving of the euro would be a disaster for the French banking system. But I don't think that's enough of a reason to allow the slavery of the people in Southern Europe to continue. We have to address it, and the sooner we address it, the less the debts will continue to increase.
Thanks. We have the lady over there, and then you.
Dr. Schluter, I listened to your presentation. try this one. I listened to your presentation this morning. I liked you a lot in the first part of it. I liked you a lot less in the last part of it. That's a joke, because you meant to be controversial, and I think you triggered shock and awe amongst the audience. I'm grateful that you elaborated a little bit on the euro. I'm just wondering, what would change in Southern Europe if the euro was to be abolished? We know by hearsay or experience that a lot of Southern European countries are in a mess of red tape. Bureaucracy is just immense and swallows up an awful lot of money. Would that actually change once the euro doesn't exist anymore? And a second question, you were talking about haircut or debt remission for Greece. What if all the debts Greece had incurred would be remitted? Would that help the country? Would that help the young people that are being unemployed? Or would more and more money be lost in exactly their own bureaucracy? And I've got one last question. That I was brought up in a Christian family, and you would only buy what you could afford actually to buy. My father ran a SME, a small and medium-sized business. I took out a mortgage on a flat I bought as a pension provision, and as a consequence of the very low interest rates, I'm not in a position to pay back my mortgage the way I planned to do. Can you do something about the interest rates worldwide, please?
Can you remind me just the first question again was, remind me the first question? Oh, would anything change in Greece? Yes. So let me comment on that. Do you know why Greek people don't pay tax? Well, it goes back to 1858, when the Turks took over Greece, so that the Greeks were having to pay tax to their Turkish masters. And therefore, for however many decades it took for the Turks to leave, the culture among Greek people was to avoid paying tax. So how do you change that culture? I don't think we can come in from Northern Europe and tell them they must change their culture. They've got to learn that from within. Now, I need some water. I think we would feel very resistant in Britain, and you in Germany, if the Greeks came to the north of Europe and told us how we must change the way we do our work. They could say, you work too hard. You are too focused on your business. You're not spending enough time relaxing. You've got a wrong view of the world. Change. And we would say, no, you can't tell us to change. We will run Deutschland like we want Deutschland to be. Right, correct. So I don't think we can tell the Greeks how to behave. And also, if you look at the society relationally, it is certainly corrupt in certain respects, with the red tape and the government and the bureaucracy and the corruption. But in other ways, they have much to teach us. The way that the parents care for the children, the strength of the extended family relations, the community relations, the generosity of people when there is need in that community. They don't have 3 million children in the court system like we do in Britain. They don't have such a high divorce rate. They don't have people just going off and having sexual liaisons every day, as we do in Europe. So relationally, from God's point of view, they may be a more developed society than Britain or even Germany. So I think we have to be careful. If they want to be poorer, if they're going to be poorer, we should allow them the freedom to make that choice. That would be my view.
Thanks a lot. The second question regarding her flat.
The second question was exactly, I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat it. Yep. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so the second question was, what would change in Southern Europe if there was no euro? Well, I think you would go back to the situation with the drachma. You'd have a constant process of devaluation of the currency. That would cause some inflationary pressures. But it would also mean that you would increase tourism, exports of olives and other processed agricultural commodities and so on, because the exchange rate would favor exports over domestic consumption. Yes, against, obviously, in competition with the other European countries that have a warmer climate. But the currency is really blocking the growth of exports. And the debt is preventing any external investment. So what Greece needs, as we were hearing from our brother in a sense, what Greece needs is external investment. But why won't people go and invest in Greece? They see this huge mountain of debt. And they say that as long as that debt is there, we are not going to invest in Greece because the government can wipe out our profits at any time to repay debts. The IMF may require it, or things like that. So we need to get rid of the debt to give Greece a chance. And they've got 60% of their young people unemployed. Imagine it was Germany, and 60% of your young people were unemployed. It's horrendous. And the banks are all completely bankrupt, actually. There's no financial infrastructure with any strength. And lastly, how do you increase interest rates globally? Well, I think Donald Trump will probably sort that one out for you. So I'm sure you're an admirer of his, but it depends on how much growth there is in demand for funds and how much more quantitative easing we do. Now, we've done a biblical critique of quantitative easing and the money supply. It's available on the Salux stall there. It's called The Crumbling Foundations. It's a study by the Jubilee Center in Cambridge about how we create money and what is a biblical critique of that. So do look at that if you have time.
So thanks a lot. We have at least 10 questions more. So first you and then over you.
Okay, just a short. You have also in a country different regions which are different productivity. Yeah. So Bavaria is better than maybe northern Germany. Scotland is different than Wales. I am careful. So why doesn't that also help in Euro to have it visit? Is it because we don't have a real common economy, or what's the reason for this?
Yes, there is a strong point you're making, but there are obviously within countries big differences in productivity growth. So, for example, North Italy is growing much faster in productivity than southern Italy, and Sicily particularly. Or if you look at England, the south of England is growing faster than the north of England. So within a country, the way you handle that is through fiscal policy. So you have rates of taxation. You have rates of taxation which allow money to be transferred from the rich part of the country to the poor part of the country. Now, you could say we could do that across Europe. Why don't we just put in a single taxation system for everybody, allow the Eurocrats in Brussels to determine our rates of taxation, and then we will transfer the money from one part of Europe to another? Or we might even involve the Swiss system, where the poor cantons put proposals to the rich cantons, and the rich cantons say which ones they will fund and why, which is a better system than just transferring the money, I think. And the reason against that is that I think across Europe, we're not ready yet to have a single system of taxation across the whole continent. And we don't feel democratically that we can influence that process. We feel some people out there would decide our tax system and how it's allocated, and we would have no say. For the distant future, I think.
Okay, thanks a lot. Mr. Henning?
Thank you very much for the first part of what you have talked. And I want to comment once more on the second one.
Please.
I urgently ask you to be cautious about the shortcutting arguments as you did it in the plenary. It was quite good here and was understandable because you make room for right-wing parties, also in our country, which misuse your arguments. And this is really dangerous. And it's a political responsibility that we avoid that these short arguments are used in a way, well, there has been transferred money to Middle Europe, go out of the Europe, and the short conclusion is then the problem is solved. And you could get the impression, it was not your purpose, you could get the impression that this was your message. And I feel this is really dangerous. So it's really, I ask you to do it as you did it in the first part and make longer arguments, and then it's okay. My second argument and question is continuing to your argument. I thought a lot about that, and as some of you know, a lot in the political discussions about what shall we do as Germans with the South partners and all these stuff. It's true that we are the very winners from the financial crisis. But there are two parties, sellers and buyers. It is also true that Germany, in respect to the social system, did their homework with the Schluter agenda. And now it's done in France, and it's not yet done in the southern countries. This is another argument which made us so profitable. Now we are the winners. And we are the winners, similar to Bavaria and to Baden-Württemberg in the context of Northern Westphalia. I come from Bavaria, living in Northern Westphalia. And I tell you, we had 25 up to 30% unemployment there. And Northern Westphalia lived from the solidarity of shifting money from Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg to the north. And we learned to live with Saarland and Bremen. We have our Greek in Germany, but you don't worry about that. And I think my argument is we can't wait until the tax system has been equalized. We have to act now. And it's like a customer with Greek who has no money. We have to negotiate and to give him the money in a cut of death and make strong cooperation now, not in any time in the future.
Thanks, Professor Henning. Maybe something also to the right-wing movements we have.
Yes.
That's an issue.
Yes, it is an issue. So I wrote a paper in 2007 saying why I was afraid that fascism was going to be a major force in European politics in the years to come. That was in 2007. Because I could see all the forces of extreme right-wing politics growing. All the ground was ready for this plant to grow. And as Christians, we should be, I believe, very deeply concerned about that. So please don't think I'm coming from the extreme right. If you want me to comment on the euro properly in a talk, please give me next time an hour and a half and not 50 minutes. But I want to defend myself a little bit, and I want to defend myself like this, that I can see the danger you're referring to, and I take it seriously, and I will reflect upon it. But there is a need somehow to wake up the Christian constituency. And how do you do that without making some very blunt statements, like I made today? And it has caused some interest. And now maybe people will stop and read and think and reflect. And we are putting out a paper with Salux on March the 28th in Brussels, spelling out the argument properly and in detail about how to create a relational Europe. So I think I partly agree with you, And partly, I think that if I had my time again, I might do the same if I wasn't given an hour and a half, because I just feel we need to address it. And as Christians, we need to be aware of the enormous financial dangers that we are now operating in the global economy. It's high-risk territory.
Thanks a lot. Over there and then there. Okay.
Thank you. I enjoyed a lot the explications this morning around how God is a God of relationships and the principles that you derive from the Bible. If I apply those principles to Europe, however, I come to very, very different conclusions. I think the founders of Europe actually had in mind to create better relationships among the nations. So and many of them actually explicitly doing this for Christian purposes.
Yeah.
Similarly, also the introduction of the euro has been to strengthen this relationship and to strengthen the possibilities for travel, for trade and others. And if I look at some of the facts, and for instance, the McKinsey report, I work for McKinsey, shows that all countries in Europe have benefited from the euro. It is true that Germany has contributed the most, but all countries have contributed. So it's difficult to say if it's good or bad, if one benefits more than the other, as long as all benefit. And then if I could continue to go on and see what happens if people who have entered the relationship on a voluntarily basis, like all the countries who joined the euro did, what if they are in trouble? Is it then right to cut that relationship and let them go? Or is it better to invest in that relationship and keep on supporting them? So I find this a very tough problem to solve, and I find it's too extreme to ask for an exit of the euro, but rather, because of the relationship, I would say we need to invest into these countries. And I would think that Germany has a specific responsibility, given the economic strengths it has. But it also has, but that is a bilateral responsibility, where those countries who wanted to get into the relationship also have their share in a relationship.
Well, I like your relational thinking. So if I've helped you to think in that way, I'm encouraged. That is, I think we have to look at all relationships from both sides. And I think the relationship between Germany and Greece is much more complex than I've had a chance to fully spell out. I agree with that. However, Greece now owes German financial institutions around $60.5 billion. 2015, 2016 data, I don't have anything more recent. There is no way that Greece can ever pay that off. And I think you're right in saying what we need is direct investment into Greece to start producing economic activity and growth. And you may know that there's been a suggestion of linking returns on debt to growth of GDP. So GDP-based securities are one way out of this dilemma, but there is no way that you'll get direct investment into Greece unless you sort out the debt. And it's time that we called a spade and had truthfulness and transparency and said, look, we know that Greece cannot repay debt. Now, Germany was given a huge amount of money under the Marshall Plan after the Second World War to rebuild the country. It was an act of grace by the United States, because the United States had just been fighting German soldiers. But as an act of grace, there was this huge amount of money given. Huge. Is it impossible to imagine now that Germany could give as an act of grace, that is unmerited generosity, give an act of grace to Greece to help them out of their problems if they left the euro? Or are we unable to think like that? Do you know the parable in Matthew 18? There are two debtors. One is forgiven a mountain. He immediately goes out and finds someone who owes just a little bit. And he takes him by the throat and says, you will not go free until you pay every penny. Now, Germany has been let off a mountain of debt in the past. Is it now going to be so vicious to some small country that owes a relatively small amount of money. Now, should be a matter of negotiation, discussion, a way to build a relationship. But as long as Germany says, we will not let you off a cent of this debt, it's just going to grow and grow. I don't see any hope for the future of the relationship with Greece. And it is engendering great bitterness. And that is what God hates. He hates that broken relationship. And that if you don't like my solution, please come up with a solution. Please come up with a solution which does not say, you, Greece, are the whole problem, and now you must change. And it's not our problem at all, it's your problem. You come up with a solution, and we'll listen.
Thanks a lot, Michael. The further question over there.
I'm from the Netherlands, so I feel with France. We have. First, I want to ask if you can send a soccer missionary to us. That would be really good. But we have elections in 2 weeks, and a few months ago, nobody thought that Donald Trump would win. But what if the Dutch choose the right-wing party? France does that. What if Holland leaves the euro, France leaves? What will happen to the euro, and how would Germany have to react?
Well, I think the basic position that my organization has taken is that Europe is fundamentally divided between half of Europe who want a stronger federal Europe and half of Europe who want to get out, roughly. In Britain, 52 to 48%. Maybe if we held the whole Brexit discussion 1 month later, it could have been different. In the French election, it depends on whether there is an ISIS explosion a week before the election, then everybody votes for Le Pen. We don't know. But the point is, huge numbers want in, huge numbers want out. What do you do? Now, we don't want to go the route of the United States. Half Republican, half Democrat, 50.1% this time for the Republicans, but last time 50.1% for the Democrats. Then they do everything their way, then they do everything their way. Now we have Obamacare, now we're unwinding Obamacare. It's a mess. So we don't want to go that way in Europe. So we must find a way to build what we've called confederal Europe. A Europe that recognizes the value of being a continent with a shared value system and cultivates that shared value system for some decades, I think. With a shared economy in terms of exchange of goods and services and so on, but without insisting on free mobility of labor and the rest that goes with it, which has left so many people upset. And we need to build a relational view of rights. So we recognize the rights of the migrants, but we must balance those rights with the rights of the domestic populations. There are two sides to it. And if we're going to deal with migrants, we need really to deal with the cause. Because if we don't deal with the cause, then they're estimating that within 20, 30 years, we will have 100 million people from Central Africa wanting to enter the EU, and we won't be able to stop it. There are already these flows of migrants, and you can see the pathways out of Central Africa. I've spent much of my life in Africa. I know how much they want to come here and why. But we must, therefore, have a fundamental shift in how we resource and work with the countries that are sending these migrants. So unless we deal with the migrant crisis, and unless we deal with this currency problem, then we're going to land ourselves in a very terrible mess. And the purpose of our publication, which is coming at the end of March, is to say, all right, so what does this confederal Europe look like? What are the steps to reach it, and so on? And we're also writing a paper which will be out in March, which you can download free from the internet, from the Jubilee Center website, jubilee-center.org, which is a paper which suggests that as Christians, our major task now is to build the relationship between the people who want integration and the people who want separation. We need to rebuild the relationship between those two major groups right across Europe if we are to prevent the whole thing leading to much bitterness and anger, and then you are sowing the seeds for war.
Thanks a lot, Michael Schluter.